Liz Brott, and today we are going to do a video about how to draw cat eyes. I just have some examples here of the kinds of eyes that I've drawn that are for cats, and this is similar to the one that we're going to do today, which is a nice blue-green one. A couple things to point out about cat eyes is that they are almond shaped, and they always have a vertical pupil. At least for domestic cats. The larger the cat, the less vertical the pupil is. It is elliptical shaped for like a bobcat, and for large cats like lions and tigers, it's actually round. And I always start out by just having the shape of the eye drawn. I use micron pens, and I make sure that the ink is dry before I start because I use Gamsol to blend, and if the black ink is not completely dry, you're going to start to smear that as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is I tend to draw cat eyes similar to drawing a gem, and gems are going to have not a gemstone opaque like turquoise, but a clear gem, and so you'll have a light source that would hit on a top side, and then the gem is going to be darkest on that side and then lightest on the bottom. So I have a similar technique to drawing gemstones that I use for cat's eyes. With regards to colors, I'm going to use Polychromos pencils for today, and just so we don't take up a lot of time going through the colors, these are the colors that I have. It's not necessary that you have Polychromos, and it's not necessary that you are using exactly these, but since I am using, I'm going to do a blue-green eyes, I just have a whole bunch of colors in different values from dark all the way to light bright, including some turquoisey colors. And then I always like to use a base very light color such as cream, and then black, and then for the veining I'm going to use this walnut as well as some of that dark turquoise color. And then for the highlight I just use a white gel pen. This is the one that we will be using, and I will be blending with Gamsol with the blending stump. So this is the eye that we're going to start with, and cat's eyes are always lightest and brightest, very close to the pupil, and so I'm going to start with the leaf green right now, very lightly close to the pupil. The shadow is going to be darkest right underneath the lid, and then it's going to be quite dark, but not a wide dark spot near the bottom. It's going to be widest near the top. I'm going to add some of that other light green. Very close here. Add a little bit of the more turquoisey green. Cat's eyes come in every color of the rainbow, so you really can't go wrong in the choice of colors that you use. And right now this is just the base layer that we're going to blend with the Gamsol, so we're going to do a lot more detail work on top of this. So right now this is just how we want to start. Since the cat's eye for this one is going to be lightest down towards the perimeter and the bottom, I'm just putting some cream in here, and it's darkest in the widest amount towards the top. I'm going to use the darker turquoise and the darker greens, also adding some dark brown and black at the very top here. And I'm using Polychromos. Prismacolors also work well. What I like a lot about the Polychromos is you can layer them a lot without having to have any wax buildup, which I tend to find that I get with Prismacolors, but not a requirement. And I'm using Bristol Vellum cardstock for this. I tend to find that it has a nice tooth to it that accepts the colored pencils, and I've also found Bristol Smooth works well, but that tends to be better for graphite, for blending out graphite, because it really doesn't have any tooth to it. So Bristol Vellum tends to be my go-to for doing most of my colored pencil work. And let's see, we'll just sort of do some different little patches in different colors. I think the more random you are with different color patches, the more interesting it is. And always remember, this is just our base at this point, so we will be going back and adding the fine detail later. And making sure we have a good amount of cream in there. I don't have a complete set of polychromos, and I think if I did, I would probably use a super light turquoise in some of these areas. But the nice thing about colored pencils is you don't really need to have a huge set. You can do a lot of blending to get just about every color and value that you want. So I think that's pretty good for our base, and I'm going to use, like I mentioned before, Gamsol on a blending stump. And because it tends to move the pigment around, I tend to try to do the lightest color first, then go back in close to the pupil where we have our light bright greens. Pull that out. And then I finish with the edge, which has our darkest colors, darkest value. And the nice thing I find about Gamsol is it tends to evaporate quickly, but it does stay on the paper for a little while, so that when you go with your next coat of colored pencil, you don't need necessarily to blend again. It goes on very nice and smoothly and blends itself. So I'll bring some of this brown in towards the center. And then you always have a little bit left on your blending stump too, so you can go back with that. So that's our base coat. I then will go back and especially darken the corners, as well as right underneath the lid with the black. And I'm going to use just a tiny bit of black at the very bottom here, but I think for the most part I'm going to stay as light as possible, but it's just going to be black right on the inside where the eye starts to disappear. And then for the top, to continue to darken it, I'm going to add the dark brown. See if I can avoid throwing the pencils off the table. then I'm gonna go in with the really dark turquoise, which is the deep cobalt green. And I think that'll be our top. And I'm just gonna take the stump and blend that a little bit. Cat's eyes are pretty straightforward in that I find the streaks and so forth are pretty, not necessarily symmetrical, but they're always coming from the center of the eye. So I just pull things in to give that type of an illusion. So that's the base for there. I'm going to leave the veining to the very end. So now I start looking at opportunities to bring color streaks from the center, and I'm going in with a turquoise. And I'm going to blend these lines so they look a little bit more real. That is the Hello Turquoise, and then I'm going to go back in with the deep cobalt. And maybe just to bring some of that bright green out, I'm going to pull some of that out. And use the blending stump again. And I press pretty hard with the stump because I don't like to see those lines looking too much like they're just coming from the pencil. They tend not to look real. I tend to want to layer those lines as much as possible with different colors. So that's that. I think what I'm going to do next is the veining. And for the veining, I always make sure that I use a super sharp pencil. And similar to the veining on the reptile eyes, you just want to make it look organic. And all cat's eyes actually have veining, but you don't always see it, depending on the color of the cat's eyes and the way the light is hitting the cat. And so, but it is always down towards the bottom of the eye. And I have two kitties, so they're my constant eye models. And that's how we're going to leave that. Maybe bring that one more towards the top, that one towards the bottom. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm not going to do a tutorial on fur, but what I will say is just to finish it off so it looks a little bit more realistic, I'll do a little bit of coloring around the outside of the eye, and I'm just going to do this with a little bit of black, a little bit of the walnut brown, and then I'm going to use a lighter brown, and then I'm going to pull it out with the Gamsol, and that way you'll see something that gives a little bit of the illusion of fur. Depending on how light is hitting the cat's eye, you will sometimes see the fur reflecting on the cat's eye. And most of the eyes that I do for kitties, the iris fills the entire eye socket, which is most of the time for a cat unless they're looking to the side. And unlike a human eye, they have a very, very large iris. And this kitty's gonna have sort of a tan colored fur. And now I'm taking the stump, blending close. And then once I go all the way around, then I will pull it out, and that just kind of makes it look a little bit fluffy, like fur. One of my cats has super long fur. And just touch up any white spots. And now I'm going to go back in and just darken it as much as I can right underneath that lid. And I find corners are super important to darken, because that, especially on an object that's spherical, that's really where it's going to start to disappear. So on this almond shape, I really want to get it dark in those locations. And then also touch it up just a little bit at the bottom here. And then since I want to keep it really light at the bottom, I'm going to go with a fairly light green, just to blend that a little bit there. Light blue green. And on the top, bring in a little bit more of that walnut brown. Blend that around. Maybe add a little bit of that medium brown. It's kind of randomly through here. And there, I think that's pretty good. Oh, I'm gonna go back a little bit more, because on the outside, cats' eyes go in. This is with the nose on the left side of the eye here. They're actually pretty dark in this location right here, so just bring that in. And now the highlight. And cats' eyes are super reflective, and they will reflect anything that is shining at it, including your iPhone if you're taking a picture of the cat eye. So I'm gonna make it sort of like, my pen isn't working, of course, that we have a window across from the cat. And I usually do the gel pen somewhat in the shape of the reflection that I want to get, and then I come back and I scrape away at it. So I'm not sure if I like that. Need to have it dry a little bit. And then I scrape either with a Prismacolor blending pencil to sharpen up the light. I find that is a really good way to chip away and fine tune it. Any highlights I find on any surface, the sharper they are, the more realistic they're gonna look. Take away a little bit of that. And there you go, a cat's eye. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I look forward to seeing your work on our new webpage. Thank you.